بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Uh, so this is the third session that we have after the introductory session. So with the introductory session, it would be the fourth session. And over, I guess, the course of the past two sessions, excluding the introductory session, we began looking at a number of verses, from the Quran, starting from the beginning, Surah Al-Fatiha. And this program is not meant to really cover the entire Quran, and it's not really meant to be a tafsir course or program either. It's just kind of reflecting on, selected ayat from the Quran, and hopefully, serves as and he puts interest into us to be pondering over the Quran, right? Again, like I've mentioned before, a number of times, this Quran, we need to understand and realize what this book that we're speaking about is, right? It's the guide, it's our guide, it's that shows us and tells us the way our Creator wants us to be on. It's what clarifies the truth from falsehood. It's what we need. It's what we need to live a good life in this world, and of course in the hereafter as well, right? And so when we look at it from that perspective, we need to pay attention to what the message being delivered is, right? And with that being said, just a quick review, I guess, of what we've sort of covered. I remember asking this last week as well, but inshallah, everyone is excused in terms of participating. But the Surah Al-Fatiha is what we read every day in our salawat. We read it 17 times each day at the very minimum. And with that being said, it's an important surah that we ought to understand, right, to the best of our abilities. And there are many tafsir lessons in various languages on this surah, and if one was to even start it, if one was to go into depth, there is a lot of lessons one can take from it. And we did kind of go over some of the take-home points on this surah, so that hopefully it has an impact when you're reading this surah in your salah or outside of salah. And then we kind of transition into Surah Al-Baqarah. We covered selected number of ayats. So we began with the second ayah in the Quran, and we mentioned about how Allah Azza wa Jalla is very straightforward in terms of delivering the message, and mentioning how this book, there is no doubt in it. It's guidance for the muttaqun, right? Hudan lil muttaqin. And this ayah is an ayah that impacted a lot of people who were not Muslims in the first place. And just by reading this ayah, for many people, and I shared a story last week as well, it was a case or a reason for them to enter Islam. And what about us as Muslims, though, who are born into Islam, where we have the Quran with us? This is our book, but how many of us are moved by these ayats from the book of Allah Azza wa Jalla? And then mentioned that there are certain descriptions that are given for these al-muttaqun, and Allah Azza wa Jalla concludes this group of people, this group of muttaqun, and those who have these descriptions or implement these descriptions, that for them they are upon the guidance of Allah Azza wa Jal, and they are the ones who are successful. أُولَٰئِكَ عَلَىٰ هُدًى مِّن رَبِّهِمْ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. And so the question we ask ourselves is, again, who does not want to be from those who are successful? When we speak about even just in this life that we live in, many of us, we want to see ourselves be successful in our education. We want to see ourselves, for our children, be successful in a business. We want to be successful in the job that we have, and so on and so forth. right? And what about to be from those whom Allah Azza wa Jal sees as successful, our creator, right? And يعني, again, it connects all this, this one ayah alone connects to a lot of different ayats in the Quran. Like it reminds me, for example, of the surah that many of us have memorized, wal asr innal insana lafi khusr, that verily by time, verily, innal insana lafi khusr, mankind is at loss, complete loss. And again, going back to this, when we, how many of us, in this dunya, we long to be successful in our education. We don't want to be from those who are lost, from those who are at a loss. We want to be successful in our business. We don't want to be from those who are lost in terms of our business. When Allah Azza wa Jal tells us in the insan lafi khusr that mankind is in loss, does this not does this not drive us to want to know why, or what are the characteristics that are missing in us that makes us at loss, right? At an individual level, most importantly, but also in the level in terms of our family, in terms of our community, and so on and so forth. And Allah Azza wa Jal gives us the answer for all of this. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Right? So we kind of touched on this last week, and then we skipped over a couple of ayat. The ayat we skipped over was the section. Immediately after Allah Azza wa Jal mentioning about the Quran and that it is a guide, Allah Azza wa Jal describes in a set number of ayats who the believers are. In 3 or 4 ayats, who the believers are. And Allah Azza wa Jal then makes mention of the disbelievers and their description in 2 ayat, and then Allah Azza wa Jal uses the remaining more than 10 ayat to describe the hypocrites. And then immediately after that, Allah Azza wa Jal gives us the first commandment, the first commandment that we will read when we open the Quran from Surah Al-Fatiha and read Surah Al-Baqarah. The first commandment we come across is a command to worship Allah Azza wa Jal, our Lord. And the first prohibition that appears is a prohibition from associating any partners with Allah Azza wa Jal. And so we understand that the most important thing or crucial thing for all of mankind, because again, Allah Azza wa Jal is addressing mankind. The most important, most crucial thing that relates to us is that we ought to worship our Creator and worship no one but Him. After all, He is the one who has given us the life. He has the one who has given us, in addition to life, He has given us all the bounties and blessings. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. Whether it be from the water, or from the oxygen that we breathe, from a heart that beats on its own, little things that we don't even pay attention to. We don't really pay attention to. But these are things we need to, because we need to be grateful to the one who has provided us with all of these. Right? An analogy is, for those of you who are parents, you probably understand, will appreciate this more, is that you have a child that you raise, and you've given them shelter, you've given them food, you've basically taken care of them, made sure you put them in education and stuff. And after everything, and instead of thanking you and being grateful to you, they go to maybe say a neighbor, or they go to some random person, and they say, thank you for everything that you've done. Thank you for the shelter that you've given me, for the shelter that I have, for example, for the being able to have survived. Imagine how you as a parent feels when you see that this person that you raised for a decade, 2 decades, right, then turns away, and instead of being grateful to you, instead of being appreciative to you, shares that, or either directs that or shares that appreciation to someone who had nothing to do with any of the things that what you've provided for them, right? Think about that. And that's what those who don't implement Tawheed, that is essentially what they do with Allah Azza wa Jal. After Allah Azza wa Jal has given us everything that we need, and has blessed us with so many blessings, and then we show gratitude or appreciation or humility or some other forms of worship to other than him, you know, this is a grave, grave, grave sin. And this is dhulm, oppression on its own. As Allah Azza wa Jal even mentioned in the shirk la dhulmun azim, that associating worship or partners with Allah Azza wa Jal is a grave oppression. And so after these ayat, Allah Azza wa Jal then mentions and challenges the disbelievers, those who don't believe in Allah Azza wa Jal or in the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a messenger, or those who don't believe in the Quran being a revelation from Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions immediately after these ayats that we've mentioned, وَإِن كُنتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِّمَّا نَزَّلْنَا عَلَى عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِثْلِهِ وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Right? And Allah Azza wa Jal is addressing, you know, the people from that time up until now, that if you doubt that this revelation, this book that was revealed to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, who was a servant of Allah Azza wa Jal, then just bring a chapter that's similar to it, right? Prove prove that this is from other than Allah Azza wa Jal, that this is just made up by Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, right? And this, the Quran, this ayah highlights a number of things. And one of the things that actually, I'll just do a slight detour because it's related to this topic before we continue and was about to say. But this, if you think about it, the Quraysh of the time, they were a people who excelled in the language, in the Arabic language. That was their expertise. And in trying to put down Islam, they found it easier to wage physical battles with the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslim, risking their lives. They found that to be easier than to respond, than to bring something like the Quran, which would obviously then just dismantle the religion, or the teachings of that the Prophet ﷺ would have come with, had that been the case. But of course, they knew that this Quran was from Allah Azza wa Jal. They knew that this Quran was not something that could be replicated, something that was inimitable. And that's why they knew that from what they thought was their only chance of trying to put Islam down was to pick up their swords and risk their lives and everything. And of course, Allah Azza wa Jal humiliated them. And of course, protected his deen, because this is the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. Right? So these were people who excelled in the Arabic language. They used to have poetry battles. Right? They were proud of their linguistic skills. And Allah Azza wa Jal, I think we pointed this out last week a little bit, revealed the Quran in the Arabic, using the Arabic letters. And using the letters, there's certain literary styles that are possible. And the Quran came in a style that is unlike any of the possible styles. And that's one thing. The other thing is that the Quran, it contains the type of knowledge and wisdom that is impossible for a man to have had. And when it comes to knowledge, for example, we're talking about, when it comes to knowledge, for example, knowledge of for example, if we use the example of the development of the fetus, the type of knowledge that is impossible to have at that time, 1400 years ago, by a man in the desert, in terms of how the fetus develops. And this is something that no one then would be able to, see or witness with their own eyes. And yet, now in this time and era when we have the technology and whatnot, they realize that everything that was mentioned in the Quran 1400 years ago is correct. And so the question we should ask is, how is it that a person from the desert in Arabia 1400 years ago would have this kind of knowledge? And this is a proof that this didn't come from him, but came from the one who knows everything, the creator, Allah Azza wa Jal. And also, so that's one of the knowledge that the Quran possesses that is impossible for someone to have known at that time. The other knowledge is the knowledge of the future, the prophecies. And this is something, again, that only the creator of the universe would know. Because who knows the future in detail? Only Allah Azza wa Jal. And so when we find ayat in the Quran that speak about what will happen in the future in detail, and this happens and we witness it, then this is a sign that this is from, that this could not have been made by a man, but rather it had to have come from the one who knows everything, from the one who created everything. And I just want to make a point here, because it's an important point, that there is a difference between a prediction and a prophecy. A prediction is something that anyone can make. And the difference between a prediction and a prophecy is that a prediction requires some knowledge of some sort that you would use to help estimate or guess or predict what will happen, right? Which is what happens, for example, when they do weather forecasts and whatnot. Based on what we observe, we see X, Y, Z, and we understand patterns. And based on this, we predict that X, Y, Z is going to happen. And even with that, we see that no one gets it perfectly. You get it sometimes, and you don't get it other times. A prophecy is something where there is no indication whatsoever of anything happening. And then with no indication, you're saying X, Y, Z will happen. And this is something that no one would know except the creator, Allah Azza wa Jal, the one who knows everything. An example of this is when we have in the cases of, for example, we see from the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he makes mention of, for example, or he implies that, or he has, for example, with him Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman, and he mentions, I have with me 2 shaheeds and a Siddiq. I have with me 2 shaheeds. How would he have known that 2 of his companions will be killed? How? Right? And that's exactly what happened with Umar and Uthman radiallahu anhuma. Whereas Abu Bakr radiallahu anh died a regular death. And how would he know, for example, that my khilafah will only last 30 years after my past? How would he know that? How would he know about the fate of Ammar ibn Yasir, that he will be killed by an aggressor, a group that's an aggressor? How would he know that? This is not stuff you can predict. Or even if we look at a time, for example, in today's time, where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that there will come a time when the Arabs will be competing with each other and building tall buildings. And that's exactly what we're witnessing now. And what about when the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that there will come a time when interest will be unavoidable, that even if you're not in it, that somehow there's some kind of interaction where that is there in the background, for example. And now we know the whole world basically operates, you need a bank to be able to, store money, have a business, whatever it is. And even though you are not dealing with the bank in terms of interest, and we're not supposed to, it's forbidden for us to be involved in interest at all. But there is, background stuff that bank will do without your permission or whatever it is, right? And we're basically in a time where interest is very widespread. How about when the Prophet ﷺ mentions that there will come a time, or he indicated of, when he spoke about a people, who will be punished with specific punishments. And when asking what it is that they've done, is that they've made a lie that spread very quickly, far east, far west. And that's something in the old time, when you needed to, if you needed any speech of yours to reach the east and the west, would take months and months and months to get there. And today, with one social media, one button, you just type and click send, far east, far west, everyone around the globe will see the slide that you made. May Allah protect us all. So all of these are just some examples of what the Prophet ﷺ had. There is many, many, many examples in terms of prophecies that the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned. And if we go back to the Quran itself has prophecies that are within the Quran that are clear indications that this could not have been written by man, that this must have been sent down by the one who knows and has knowledge of everything. And this is something important that we need to know. Because when we read in the Quran, we're asked, or we're told to, and we're expected to ponder on these ayats. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ إِلَيْكَ مُبَارَكٌ لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ وَلِيَتَذَكَّرَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. We are told and we're commanded to be pondering on these ayats. And if we do so, it increases us, if we do so, it does nothing but increase us in our iman, our conviction, right? And this is one of the problems that we have today in this day and age, where how many of young Muslims and even older who begin to have doubts about the religion as a whole, because they don't read the Quran, because they don't attend circles where the Quran is being taught, not just in terms of letters, but circles where the Quran is being taught in terms of its tafsir and so on and so forth. And the truth is that we have every answer that we need that is in the Quran. Everything that we need to know is in the Quran. And here we can see that Allah Azza wa Jal challenges those who doubt the Quran being the word of Allah Azza wa Jal, challenges them and says, use your brain. If you think that this is not from Allah Azza wa Jal, if you think that it's from a man, then why don't you just bring something? Bring one verse. Well, in this ayah says, bring a chapter that's similar to, that is like the Quran, right? And call upon your witnesses if you are truthful. And then Allah Azza wa Jal threatens those who know that this is in fact from Allah Azza wa Jal, and who just try to find means to just reject it. فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا فَاتَّقُوا النَّارَ الَّتِي وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ أُعِدَّتْ لِلْكَافِرِينَ. And if you are not able to, and you will never be able to, then fear the fire whose fuel are men and stone, people and stones, prepared for those who disbelieve. And this is a very powerful ayah, or these ayat are very, very powerful, because yani, these are, they're speaking to our intellect, and they're speaking to our psychology. First, Allah Azza wa Jalla is bringing an intellectual argument to us. And when we comprehend and we realize and we know the truth, but we start to be arrogant and whatnot, then we're threatened with this fire, which has a psychological impact. And of course, Allah Azza wa Jalla guides whom He wills. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to make us firm upon guidance. And I think with that, I don't want to go over. We'll just suffice with up to here for now. If there are any questions or any comments, feel free to share. Or if there are any corrections that that you think could be made, then please do share, inshallah. And with that, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.
I do have a question, but I'll wait a few minutes to let anybody else ask the question. Not a whole few minutes, but maybe shorter. I guess I can go ahead and ask the question. So you talked about, you know, being gratefulness as being one of the basis of why we turn to Allah in appreciation and thankfulness for all the favors He has done for us. The follow-up question I want to ask is, this topic of thankfulness, you also hear it about Allah Himself, that He is shakiran alima, that He is also appreciative and thankful. So can you speak to that, like as well? That you know, is it sometimes that you know, some of us hear that, you know, if we were as pious as the most pious person in the whole world, that it would not increase Allah's kingdom any. And so from that, maybe we come away feeling that it just doesn't matter then if we are pious or not. Can you speak to that, Sheikh Abdul Rahman?
Firstly, inshallah, you can address me as a brother, bi'idhnillah, because I don't feel that I should be addressed as Sheikh. Second thing, you actually reminded me of a point that I actually want to share. Sorry, before I guess getting to your point. And it's an example that I've taken from there's a famous Dari, Shamsi, in this aspect of being grateful, and that is for us to realize the bounties that Allah Azza wa Jal has given us. And the example that he uses, and I'm taking from him, is imagine for each one of you. So I see we have 15 participants, and that I guess includes me. Imagine, you know, for each one of you, that you are approached and you are given an offer of $2 million. $2 million. All right. If you're in America, 2 million US dollars. If you're in Canada, 2 million Canadian dollars. And you're just, the offer is there because the person really is having a great day. They're a billionaire themselves, and they just want to give it to you. and you are the one they chose. The minimum, and I want to see if you guys agree with me or not. But don't you feel like the minimum that you would do is be grateful to them? Every time that you use that $2 million, that you use it to spend to buy a car or a house, or use it for education or for whatever it is, you will be thinking and remembering them. Wow, this person who gave me this $2 million, look what I'm doing with it. You're so grateful to them. But what if the person had come to you and they give you an offer of $2 million on the condition that you give them your two eyes? Would you go for it or no? And it's a question that I'm asking. Would you accept $2 million for in exchange for your two eyes for whatever reason?
No.
Absolutely no. Right? And what this tells us is that your two eyes are more valuable than the $2 million that you would receive. And if you're going to be grateful for the first $2 million offer, then how come you're not grateful to the one who gave you two eyes for free, which is worth way more than the $2 million? Think about it. You're with me in that you would be grateful to that person who gave you $2 million for free. And we have Allah Azza wa Jal who gave us our two eyes for free. And we don't feel like we ought to be grateful. And you think it's just the eyes? What about the mouth that we have? What about the ears that we hear from, that we used to hear? Right? What about even something simple like our elbow? What about our lungs, our hearts, our kidneys? Everything. In fact, even if it's just our life, that alone is sufficient. The fact that we are breathing air and we're living is sufficient for us to be grateful. Right? And this is something just to think about, to ponder. Right? And in regards to your point, Allah Azza wa Jal is not in need of our worship, of us being grateful to Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah Azza wa Jal is not in need of anything. We are the ones in need of being grateful to Allah. We are the ones in need of worshiping Allah Azza wa Jal. We are the ones in need of His guidance. Guidance for our lives in this life and for protection in the hereafter. We are the ones who need Allah Azza wa Jal, not the other way around. And so when we worship Allah Azza wa Jal, we don't in any way increase His kingdom. And if we don't worship Allah Azza wa Jal, we don't in any way decrease His kingdom, anything from His kingdom, but we only benefit ourselves. And so this should be a reason, we should be always thinking to, we should always be in constant worship of Allah Azza wa Jal for our own selves, right? And then just a point that I want to mention here is when we talk about worshiping and being grateful to Allah Azza wa Jal, there's another example that I'm also taking from Shamsi, from England, and this is also another very powerful example that he uses when it comes to acknowledging and understanding that we ought to worship Allah Azza wa Jal and we ought to be grateful. The question then is how to be grateful, how to show gratitude. And we know that if there's someone we love and we want to give them a gift, we know to give them something that they appreciate and not necessarily what we would appreciate. So for example, you have a mother and you want to be grateful and thankful to her and you want to buy her a gift, you're not going to buy a gift that that only you think is right, or not right, afwan, that you think is, a good thing. Rather, you're going to pick something that she likes. So likewise, when we're grateful to Allah Azza wa Jal, it ought to be the case that we are grateful in the way that He pleases. And this is where the teachings, the Sharia comes in. This is where the teaching of Islam comes in, and where, uh, the message comes into play. Because we ought to worship Allah Azza wa Jal the way He wants to be worshipped, not the way we choose to be worshipped. And that necessitates that we learn and follow and implement the Quran and the Sunnah upon the understanding of the early generations, the Salaf al-Salihin. And so I just wanted to share that. I know it's a little bit of a side point, but I hope that addressed the points, your points, yes.
In the back of my mind as well was how, when a group of people sit around and remember Allah, that the angels surround them until they go to Allah with that, and Allah asks them, how have you left my servants? And this conversation, I'm hearing that this conversation is for our benefit, and Allah already knows the answer. And they say, so and so your servants were remembering you, and Allah is basically pleased with that, right? Even though it doesn't increase His kingdom and doesn't take away what we do. I think part of what I see in people is that the feeling that I don't matter, right? And so like the Black Lives Matter people say, like, Black Lives Matter. Also, to Allah, I feel like what we do matters, that He's pleased with guidance for us and displeased with if we go astray. So that, can you say a few words about that, or do you want to leave it at that?
We could address it, but just I'm also trying to be aware of the time.
Yes,
I know
indeed.
we've mentioned, we try to limit it to 45 minutes. But it's a good example, and it's actually a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'll just quickly touch on it. I won't really get much into it. But there's a lot of blessings when it comes to being in a gathering of knowledge, and some of the fada'il, or some of the يعني, there's a word I'm looking for. It's at the tip of my tongue. Benefits. Yes, some of the benefits apply for gatherings in a masjid, and some apply for any gathering of knowledge, right? And the one that you mentioned, it's a very good and important one to remind ourselves of, right? Because like you mentioned, in the gathering there will be angels who will ascend, and Allah Azza wa Jalla will ask them, from where have you come? And they would mention from some of your servants on the earth. And they will mention some of the things, like them glorifying Allah Azza wa Jalla, and so on and so forth. And in a long conversation, it's a conversation that happens, but Allah Azza wa Jalla makes mention of them. And the angels, when Allah Azza wa Jalla makes, for example, mentions that He'll forgive them, and they'll admit them into paradise for those who have asked. Who will protect them from the fire, from those who have asked to be protected from the group. They will mention that there was so and so who really wasn't part of the group. He was just passing by, and heard of, or seen, a sitting. So he just joined them. He really didn't go there with the intention of sitting there. And Allah Azza wa Jal will mention, him too, I forgive. Uh, the one who sits with such people, yani, shall never suffer or shall not suffer. Yani, humul qawmu la yashqa bihim jalisuhum. And this is a very, impact, a hadith that, it should really have an impact on us. And there are other virtues that are mentioned in terms of sittings of gatherings. Sittings, gatherings, or sittings of where Allah Azza wa Jalla is being remembered. And this should encourage us to be active in seeking these sittings or these gatherings. And in our case, whether we're in a masjid or whether offline or online. But while we do so, we make sure that we attend the sittings and gatherings of those who we know to be, upright in terms of their deen, in terms of their iman, in terms of their aqidah, and so on and so forth. And with that being said, I think it's best we suffice for today.
Before we go, there is a way that those of you who came late, or if you want to share what we were talking about, that you can get a hold of the recording. And Abdul Rahman, you have a Telegram channel and a WhatsApp group. Is it possible that you can drop a link here?
We can do that. Yeah. Yeah, let me share the link right now, inshallah.
Yeah. We also have a mailing list, but I don't really have handy the sign-up form for that. Inshallah, next time I will do. While Abdul Rahman is getting that list, I just want to add this, that in my observation of society, that a lot of times this example that you read in the Quran about, there it is, there's the link. Okay, so maybe we'll save the observation for later, but in short, that there's a group of people who are tested with a stream. If they get distracted by the stream, then they're not on the right path. And so a lot of what I see, some of the youth are getting distracted by are the streams of entertainment services, whether it's the streaming movies or the streaming music. So those streams, they have a tendency to grab the hearts and minds and make them unavailable for the wisdom that's right in front of their hands. And there's this aspect also of how the shaitan has many ways of keeping us away from this knowledge. Sometimes it takes the form of a power struggle with the parents, right? You want to, they may want to really be tuning into those other streams, and and the parents are here trying to pull them away and say, here, pay attention to this, and that becomes a source of conflict, and shaitan might come and say, hey, they're taking away your freedom. You want to really do this, and so from our hearts, may Allah guide us to have that connected feeling with the Quran, so much so that some of the scholars, when they come and, even though they memorized this book, when they open it, before they open it to read it, they have this feeling, Ya Allah, help me to understand what I'm about to read. And so thank you for sharing the links. When we close the meeting, those links are going to go away. So you should see if you can copy or click the WhatsApp or Telegram links. And Jazakumullah khair. That's all I want to say for now.
وجزاكم الله بمثله. بارك الله فيكم.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.